I've been with either BSME, Bellingham Society of Model Engineers, or Whitcomb Skagit Model Railroad Club for a long time. And back in the 90s, we got a call from a family to help them with disassemble a layout, which was in their way. They were trying to sell the house. And so there was this 10 by 20 layout in the basement that they wanted to see gone. So they contacted the Bellingham Society of Model Engineers, and we went over there one Saturday afternoon and helped disassemble this, given that we would have salvage rights to it. And it was pretty much a plywood Pacific operation, but very elegantly wired. And we were able to disassemble it and salvage, track, and turnouts, and most importantly, a whole bunch of Switchmaster switch machines. And we had them, didn't know what we were going to do with them, but it turned out a few years later that when we lost our lease up in Bellingham and had to build a new layout in Alger, we had all these Switchmaster turnout machines ready to go along with a lot of number 6 turnouts. So that kind of got this whole thing started. And every once in a while, maybe every 2 years or so, somebody would get hold of us. We don't advertise. Somebody would get hold of us and say, hey, can you help us disassemble a layout, or we want to give a layout to you, or something along this line. And maybe every 2 years or so we'd get contacted. More and more, we're getting more and more contacts. So that's drove me to read an article that was published in the NMRA newsletter by a guy named Charlie Getz. And so it was published in March of 2020. And he has this broad overview, just 2 pages, but a broad overview of disposition of model railroad estates. And so I read that, and I thought, okay, there are aspects of that applied to what we had been doing. But I thought maybe we need to do something that's a little bit more focused, a little bit more localized. And so I put this together for you. Model railroad estate disposition, local stories, and perhaps more importantly, resources. Even model railroaders die. And we find out that some people, owners of layouts, have discussed this with their family, and others haven't. Some people die slowly of a chronic disease, and some die suddenly. And so there's this spectrum of situations that develops. So with any estate plan, model railroad estates, your family really would appreciate your guidance. And so just a reminder, just start that discussion. And part of that would be with, what do you have? And it's amazing that many survivors don't really have a good grasp of what goes on in this little room where the husband is in his model railroad.
My last will and testament to my kids. I spent all my money. Your inheritance is in my train room. Love, Dad.
Well, it's worthwhile to make for at least your survivors, to make a spreadsheet or at least some sort of a notebook listing of what you have. Your engines, your cars, and if you can assign some sort of a ballpark value to them, to the engines, the cars, and some of the buildings and stuff like that, that gives the family some place to start. We've been dealing with this since the late 90s, and there are some common themes that the survivors are working with. So the survivor says, okay, I'm going to get out of this house, I'm going to downsize this house, I'm going to sell it, whatever, or I want the garage back. Somebody wants to put their car back in the garage for whatever reason. And then another major one is so that other people may enjoy it. So they want to pass it on, perhaps through us, and let other people enjoy it. And then very rarely, it's really cash recovery. But it does occur. And so I would say since the late 90s, I've been involved in about a dozen, maybe at the most 15 of these things. And we don't advertise it. People just contact us through the website, and the calls get funneled to me, and we start contacting folks and see what they would need or would want. So one of the questions that I think everybody should every owner should look at is, what is your layout, your actual layout work? And it's because it may not be worth much at all. Does anybody want your layout? Layouts are really difficult to get rid of, to pass on. I'm amazed at how often I hear from the family, nobody wants this. The children don't want it. The grandchildren maybe have some link to grandpa and his trains, but they're more interested in their phones. So it's rather striking that the layout itself may not have much value except for salvage. And so we get down to one man's treasure, my treasure, is another person's trash, or perhaps his wife's trash. And so how do we do it? It kind of falls into these following categories. There's just a flat-out waste management solution. I'll talk about that, an example of that. Or another one could be pretty well pre-planned and have the owner's input before their demise. And then there occasionally have been no discussions between the spouses, family, and the decisions is left to the survivors. So I have developed some stories of these people, and these are just representative people that I've encountered. Sheila was married to a denturist up in Bellingham. He had chronic pulmonary disease, and with a chronic pulmonary disease, you just kind of waste away and slowly die. He had a nice little 8x10 layout in the garage, in the middle of the garage. And Sheila wanted to know, what can we do with this? So I said, okay, why don't you check around with the YMCA, the Boy and Girls Clubs, the schools, and anything else you can think of that might take this layout. And they all came back and said, no, thank you, we don't have the room, and we don't have anybody who has the knowledge or expertise to maintain and run the layout and protect it from kids destroying it. Sheila concluded that there really is no orphanage for model railroad layouts. So the deal I struck with her was, I'll take the buildings, I'll break the layout into pieces and salvage what I can, and I'll take care of it so that she would not have to be the person who put it in a dumpster. So I did that for her. She was happy. She got her garage back, a place to park the car in. Now, Tom McCune was a member of our group. He did not die, but his layout did. Tom decided he was going to move to Texas, and he had to do something. He had to sell a house. He had to do something with this really large, really elaborate layout in his basement. So once a decision was made, Steve McCart came over and videoed the layout for Tom. So we ran trains around it, and Steve put together a nice little video. And about the next day, we started tearing this thing apart. And we being Dave, Tom, and myself. I was working just ahead of them as they were tearing things out. And I was trying to salvage track, turnouts, an occasional building, bridge, whatever. But it took us a day and a half to take this layout, large layout, from his walkout basement uphill to a waste management dumpster. Fortunately, we had a little, his neighbor's garden tractor to kind of help us get it up the hill. But it was a massive job. And I think all three of us hurt just tearing the thing apart and moving it up. Then there's a guy in Ferndale that Steve had contacted, or Steve's the family had contacted, and he had a rather elaborate N-scale layout, stuffed into, I would say, an 8x10 bedroom. 2 levels, connected by an extremely well-built helix. So Steve worked with them to auction off the rolling stock, the engines, the cars, and whatnot.
The grandson got on a website called Macari and did very good because he had contacted online trains at the time, and they'd offered him $2,000 for all the rolling stock and engines. And he got on Macari and sold everything for over $6,000. Now, he didn't clear $6,000 because he did offer some free shipping and some things like that, but his gross was $6,000. So I don't know but he did very well. And they still gave us a lot of rolling stock and all the buildings and stuff that was on the layout. But the grandson did a really good job using a site called Macari. I've never used it since, but did great.
So that left us with this layout, 8 by 10, 2 levels. How hard can it be? This thing was unbelievably over-engineered and well-built. And it took us 2 days to clear out the layout, off the walls and everything, out of there. We finally were able to speed things up because there was a window that had been covered with a layout. We got to the window and got it open, and so we could shove stuff out the window where Steve would take it over to the dumpster. It was quite an amazing process. The other one is Mark. Here's a perfect example of a guy who did not confer with his family as to what he wanted, what he had, what to do with it. And so he passed away in December, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 years ago. And about 3 weeks later, we were having an open house on a Saturday, and his wife came in while I was out running trains. The guys came and got me and said, "You got to talk to this lady." So I walk into the kitchen, not really a kitchen of the club, not really knowing what to expect. And this lady was furious, just furious. And I'm going, "What do we do?" Well, it turns out we didn't do anything. She was furious at her husband. And she blurted out that there was $50,000 she couldn't account for. Now, it turned out that part of the $50,000 was a couple of motorcycles and some rifles and shotguns, but a lot of it was trains. And it was stuffed in his attic. His wife never went up to the attic. She had no idea what was up there. Anyway, I said, "Okay, I'll come to your place. I'll look at it and talk to you about it." We worked through it, started labeling things, and eventually pricing things. I brought a lot. My wife was down in South Africa or someplace like that. And so I had all this train stuff of Mark scattered across my living room. Much of it had to be tweaked to some extent, putting on trucks and wheels and whatnot. I got that all taken care of. I tested the engines, priced things for her, got it put in boxes, and she was able to take it to the Monroe show, where she met up with Dave, and Dave kind of helped her guide her through the process of selling at a show. And I don't remember, it seems like she walked out of there with $2,000 or something like that.
More than that, yeah.
But also she took home a lot. And the last I heard, she had put it in storage somewhere. So this fall, I plan on contacting her if she's still around to see if she wants to sell it at the Linden show. We'll see if we can help her out there. Next is Roger Johnson. Roger died just about 3 years ago, on Good Friday. And Roger was a retired banker, and he loved spreadsheets. He would do spreadsheets for everything. And so Roger, he had a very nice layout in his basement. And Roger was extremely meticulous. His track work was perfect. But they decided that they needed to downsize and move into Mount Vernon, to a smaller place, of course. And he gave up his layout. I was able to salvage some rock work off of that, but mainly he had some guys come in, friends of his, to help him tear it out. And once Roger moved, no longer had the layout, but he still had the hobby, and so he would work in his living room on various modeling projects, buildings and whatnot. But the important thing that Roger did was he had spreadsheets on this stuff, and he had assigned values to it. And he said, "God, I've got over $10,000 worth of trains." And I said, "Nothing." Nothing. Then there's Terry Zeri. Terry Zeri, I spoke with you folks last fall about him. He was an F-4 Phantom pilot in Vietnam and became an art therapist up in Bellingham. He had terrible heart problem. Eventually died in bed with a big, massive heart attack again in December. And his wife managed to contact me through, I think, this group, our NMRA. And I said, "Okay, I'll come up and look at it." And she really wanted me up there the next day. So this was in February, so 6 weeks after he died, or something like that. And Terry, an artist, had this beautiful, relatively small layout out in the garage. And I said, yeah, we can take it out, and what else can we do for you? Well, what she wanted was for it to be kept together and his work to be respected. So I perhaps overpromised, but I said, yeah, I think we can do that. And in just a few days, we started tearing apart this complex, beautiful layout. And one of the things that always impressed me about this layout was that each building had its own set of power lines. And you don't see that. But he had it. And he had really nicely done buildings, kits primarily, not plastic kits, but yeah. What we did was to take the buildings off and start pulling the layout out. And how long did it take us?
One of the things I thought was impressive he also did, Don, was he had all the buildings were on like platforms. Yeah. And so they were easy to take out. So, you didn't tear the building out. You took out the whole layout, like a... Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he liked his buildings to have foundations. So we were able to take those buildings and transfer them to the Alger layout. And what it did, the quality was so high that it just elevated the quality of our layout.
And she was okay with that.
She was very happy with that.
Yeah.
And she was one of these people who wanted other people to enjoy it. She didn't care that there was any value to it. She wanted other people to see it and enjoy it. And it worked out. And she was one of these people who wanted other people to enjoy it. She didn't care that there was any value to it. She wanted other people to see it and enjoy it. And it worked out.
They even came up and saw what we did.
Yeah.
And they were very, very happy with what Don and Dave had done there.
Hang on just a moment there, I'm getting my people straightened out. Ray Smith, what do you think about him? By the way, this was the Roger Johnson approach to small things, and I'm sure you had seen it here or at Linden. He just put out a sign that says, free to a good home. This is small stuff. Some small buildings, pieces of buildings, scenery material, and whatnot. Back to Terry Zeri. This is what the layout looked like in his garage. Probably 12 feet long, maybe 16 feet long, 3 feet wide.
3 feet wide.
And so this is a mountain with tunnel portals at the far end to the right. And this was the very last thing we took off the layout. Dave came up with an idea of how to separate it, where to separate it. We were able to pull it apart, but keep it largely intact. We took it to the club and looked at it for quite some time to try to figure out how we could use it. And here it is over in what we call the southwest corner of the layout. We had Ray Aliberti come in and, well, actually Dave figured out how to get it in and attach it to the layout. Ray came in and painted it and did some light scenery work on it. And then Greg Severson came in and did the tree work. And one of the nice things he did was this nice declining or sloping line of trees. And people look at that and say, it looks like it's always been there. So we were really fortunate with the way that worked out. Terry Zeri's rolling stock. There's more to it, but he had a case at home, and this is, and I'm sorry, the picture quality is so poor. This is a dark area of the club. This is his passenger consist and a couple of his engines. And so this is eventually what happened to his rolling stock. Ray Smith. So just before Thanksgiving last year, maybe about 2 days, 3 days before Thanksgiving, we got a contact through the website. And there's this lady, who was going to downsize. She and her husband were going to downsize. And she had this train set from her father in her home, and she decided she just didn't have a place for it in her new home. This is a 1926 or 1927 Lionel passenger train. The cars here have been refurbished, repainted. The engine is pretty nicked up and marred, so it may be original. But it is, after all, almost 100 years old. We applied power to the tracks, got the cars to light up. David put a string of LEDs across the top of this acrylic case, and it shines down on it. And so this is now the entryway of the club. You walk in, you see this, almost 100-year-old Lionel. So we do sell some of this stuff, our stuff, donations to us, whatnot. And here are some typical prices that we work with through when we sell at the Linden Club or something like that. An Athearn freight car with KDs and metal wheels, we can dispose of for about $5 to $7, roughly. Some more, some less. Athearn passenger cars with metal wheels and KDs, $12. AccuRail, same thing, around $15. Walther's passenger cars, $20 to $25, depending on the railroad, can go up from there, but roughly that's what they go for. Engines, eBay is probably our friend on determining what the value is for any given engine. Brass, you can also go to eBay, but it can be overpriced and not very friendly. A brass common steam engine, unpainted, not remotored, basically as it came from Japan or Korea, runs around $250 to $350. If you're into narrow gauge, Blackstones commonly go for $500 and almost to $1,000 now. So, how do you dispose of this stuff? Well, you can directly contact the Linden Lions Club. The voice of the train show is Rich Kaiser. Here's his information, more information. As you walk into the pavilion there and pay your entrance fee, off to the left behind there is normally 3 tables or so of stuff that is donated directly to the Lions. So that's one available route. And it occurs on the first weekend of October, first full weekend. Then there's a place called Penny Pincher. They do estate clearances. They're up in Bellingham on the Guide. What they do is they come in and purchase the estate, and they liquidate it on eBay. If they can't liquidate it, it goes into the dumpster. And they were responsible for liquidating Ian Millar's collection of 500 in-scale engines. There's a new place down here in Mount Vernon called Cascadia Estate Sales and Liquidation. They are just getting up on their feet, and I've not been able to get any information on their auctions at this point, but they do exist, and they are on the sheet that I have handed out. Oops. There's Lauren Clark. He's been an eBay seller for the past 30 years, just as a kind of a fun side gig. He's done 2,000 sales. His rating is top seller plus. His rates, it's a little bit more complicated than this, but roughly is 20% for sales proceeds over $100, 25% over 40 but below 100, and then 33 on proceeds below $40. He does all the work, and he uses eBay to guide his prices, but he will do the research, writing up, listing, packaging, mailing. He'll do all that. once the cost of that is deducted from the proceeds, then you'll get 80% or 75% or 2/3. So this is for him. It would be somebody who's just here, take a look at this stuff, and take care of it for me. No muss, no fuss. He does all the work. I don't think he's ever done a full estate. Do you know?
I don't know about full estate, but I would say that he's sold a lot of my items. And I like the no muss, no fuss thing, so it works out really well.
Yeah. Then there's us, WSMRC. We generally have sales tables in Linden or the Monroe Show. The group was set up as a 501c3 not-for-profit organization at its very beginning, the charter. And that has worked out for us, and on occasion, a donation will come in, I'll work through it, assign values to it as a donation, write it up, and give the donor a sheet that he can then use as a tax deduction. It's really cumbersome, but we have done it on 2 or 3 occasions. But the other approach is that you do all the work, you label it, price it, put your name on it, and bring it to the club. The Thursday night before the Linden show or the Monroe show, David coordinates and does the selling at the show, and then you get the proceeds. Often we get a donation out of it, but we don't ask for anything. We just do it as a service. Down in Seattle, there's the guy down in Burien who runs the electric train shop. I haven't done any business with him for at least 20 years. And I understand he sells at a reasonable price. However, when he buys, you take a substantial haircut. Yeah, Steve has got a haircut down there. Okay. So one of the things we haven't talked about is our little libraries. Another good group to get prices for them and sell is the HO Swap group. Al uses them a lot. I follow them a lot. And books are sold on there, as well as rolling stock engines, rolling stock cars, what have you. There is a similar group, the HON3 for narrow gauge. And
there's also a used book site called the Libris. And they sell a lot of railroad books. I bought a few. Prices are all over the map, so you can see one for $25 and somebody over here's got it for $100.
The HON3 group really is more informational. This is what I'm doing on my layout and stuff like that. But they do have occasional sales in there.
Don, there is an N-scale group too. It's called N-scale yard sale at groups.io, and they're buying and selling pretty active. But I think there's also groups for the other scales too.
I wanted to try to keep this local, but mention these guys because I'm on there from time to time. Many of us have books that really don't fall into the rolling stock or the layout category. And so, what do you do with those? Well, there's the Roger Johnson approach. Free to a good home. He would sell some of them, but I imagine Barb is still looking at some of them around the house. But he did put up his sign, free to a good home. There's the waste management approach where somebody would just say, I don't want to deal with these things. Waste management can have them. But there must be some other ways. And we wanted to pick your brains as to how you would do it or how you would want to do it. So I wanted to open it up to you to ask you, what do you think should be done with your railroad book collection?
Many libraries have kind of a support group that has book sales. I gave 1,800 volumes on various subjects to the local library book sale when I moved to Bellingham. You don't get anything for them, they don't sell them for much, but they hopefully find good homes.
You also have price books. That's in Seattle, or there's one in Linwood. You take books in and they'll give you, it's all used books.
pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, I mean, but I've taken tons of books to them, bought books there. So half price or another, any kind of used bookstore might take some.
There are also some private individuals that will buy and resell used books, or accept them as a donation either, too.
Don, I took a few milk crates of hardbound railroad books down to Easton's Books in Mount Vernon.
Yeah.
And left them with him. And he contacted me a bit later, gave me an offer, and I said, fine. I didn't have to deal with them outside of putting them in a milk crate and taking them to them. I didn't have to worry about individually pricing them and shipping them and all that, so.
What I've done so far, got in place is, I've got a list. Things to be donated to Erie Lock and Water Historical Society, things to be donated to the Anthracite River Historical Society, and basically everything west of the Mississippi going to the group down in Snohomish, Falls there. And
Oh, yeah.
I've been talking with the girl down there, that's the archivist. I've already taken her down one load of stuff. I got 3 more boxes of track profiles I just put together to take down to her, so I'm moving stuff out now. It's like, I haven't looked at this stuff. I've saved it because I knew somebody would want it. And now I've been working with her, and I've been taking stuff down to her. I'll be making another trip shortly. The track profiles, I already took her down employee timetables and public timetables. And I also got some other stuff to her for them to sell in the gift shop. So she's a good source.
So what's the name of that group? Is it Snoqualmie?
Northwest Model Railroad Museum, I believe.
It's the
Okay.
Northwest Railroad Museum, I don't think it's.
Yeah, Northwest
At Snoqualmie?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah, they were the beneficiaries of the club in Bellingham, the Railway Museum there in the park.
Park County Railroad Museum.
Is that?
When I was down there, she was in the process of archiving the stuff that they got from Bellingham.
Ah.
She was showing me what she's doing.
Yes, Steve.
Another place that if you have railroad employees and family and stuff is the railroad archives in Burien.
Mhm.
That they take, you can donate stuff there and they take it. I volunteered down there and go through boxes of stuff that hasn't seen the light of day since 1910, and families will donate books and.
So they're not strictly just Northern Pacific stuff.
No, it's Northern Pacific, Great Northern, Milwaukee Road, Seattle, or Spokane Port in Seattle. They take, and if you have other stuff, they will work with other historical.
So they've got the contacts with other groups.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been talking to several of the local museums and libraries in Whatcom and Skagit. Some are interested, some are not because they have no capacity. And it becomes kind of a challenge of different subjects. The concept that I've been pitching is one of donating railroad topic books, model as well as prototype, and basically have a presence there, docent, and manage the collection. And accept donations, catalog it, put it into the Dewey Decimal System so they can be checked out, which really caught the interest of one. She said, so you don't want to just restrict it strictly to the reference library. I said, no, because if modelers want to look at page 64 of such and such a book, I see online where they're challenged to go buy the book. And that's not likely to happen for most people. So it'd be a way of kind of spreading the hobby. Now, how practical that's going to be, I don't know. How much interest there would be. Shelf space is dear.
Shelf space is a real challenge for libraries.
Would you consider donating books to a local facility that would then loan them out to other model railroaders? Yeah, I mean, I look at my books and I go, my son and my wife are not interested at all. They don't see the nostalgic value. In fact, I brought my first railroad book that I ever bought for $6. Well, this is worth a fortune. So I'll let you know if I find any gold here.
Okay, so we can work that up.
As somebody that used to be in the business, wills and trusts are very flexible. If you have an extensive collection and you're doing estate planning, talk to your lawyer about it, because you can put a lot of what you would like to see happen and desire into those estate planning documents. But you got to bring it up. They're not going to ask you because they're not model railroaders.
But the other thing, you've got to be very specific, because I have a good friend that passed away, and he donated a brass GP35 that was painted up Santa Fe to the club. Well, we got all of this stuff, the club was gonna sell it in Nebraska, that we'd go to different shows and parcel it out. We didn't know which GP35 he's talking about. We couldn't find it in the deal, and the family didn't know. So what the heck happened to that brass Jeep 35 that he was going to donate to the club? He got a Pacific Santa Fe, the number, put a little tag on it or something that goes to the club. Because the people that leave behind, the survivors, aren't going to tell a GP35 from a 2882 steamboat. They don't know.
Even I don't.
Yeah. I'd suggest you're very meticulous on what you're donating to specific people.
Well, before we close, I just want to remind you, and perhaps please, if you can put your rolling stock engines and whatnot onto a spreadsheet, your survivors will appreciate it. It'll be a point to start with when you're being disposed or making decisions on what to do with it. Perhaps bring an attorney into it, maybe an addendum to a will or a trust, and talk it over with your family so that they have a clearer idea of what to do with all your railroad junk.
There was a fellow that posted a layout on Mount Vernon Hobbyist, Rick Wade. Maybe somebody may have seen it. Beautiful layout, not real big. Wonderful guy. His wife came down with a serious cancer illness, and then he got brain cancer, and they went into care, and then they both passed. Well, they did not specify, and his kids came in and picked that layout out with craftsman structures and beautiful. Just it was one of those, come on, say what it all went. They brought a dumpster in, and it just. My message is, you guys know what you got. I know what I got, right? Do I want it to go in the dumpster? I mean, I'd like to at least think it went to somebody. At least take the time to do that. Don's right on, And then, like Mark said, bring an attorney in. If it's in your will, they better not be tossing it in the dumpster, right? Right? You come after them?
You can,
Take up a
you can
court?
spell out a lot of desires, but you gotta work it out with the guy writing the estate planning documents for you.
And then there's Nick Muff. How many people here have actually been to Nick Muff's house? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about, right? What's going to happen to that F7?
That's why he's not here.
I was hoping he would be here and maybe talk to us about how he's going to approach it on his level,
Yeah,
which is so
way
much
up there.
more complicated than what we have.
I've asked him about it, and he's pretty easy come, easy go. The big station, the past of the Kansas City Southern Passenger Station, you guys have all seen that. That's going to Kansas City, I guess, some historical museum or something. So that's, at least he's got that plan. But the cutter's torch for that F7, I tell you.
For sale, home with F7 in it.
Yeah, or F7 with home on top.
Okay, thank you all. Thank you for your thoughts. Have a good one.